Again, Jamie.
Hello again, Susan.
So you told me once of a great example of how laws get changed at the State House and how a law is passed. Could you say more about the example of gay marriage and how it became law in Massachusetts?
Yes, well, gay marriage was made legal by the SJC in 2003, which was in my first term as a legislator.
And SJC means the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts.
Right.
Our state Supreme Court.
Right, exactly. And so then there was an effort by legislators to overturn that decision by amending the Constitution to ban gay marriage. And so at the time there was a small group of us as legislators that worked with pro-equality advocates to get the votes to defeat that constitutional amendment. And it was the most powerful and successful example I've seen of face-to-face contacts of gay and lesbian couples sitting down with legislators who initially were opposed to same-sex marriage, telling their story about how extending this right would protect their families, would provide them more economic security, was a civil rights issue. And having those direct face-to-face contacts is really the reason that legislators who initially were anti-equality changed their votes. And so that's really the power of face-to-face contact.
So when you started, there were Democrats and other members of the legislature who were not in favor of this, and if they had the vote immediately, then it would have failed, and we would have had a constitutional amendment preventing gay marriage, you're saying?
Exactly. So that initial 2 to 4 years was working to convince legislators to switch their votes. So, and again, if it were not for the face-to-face contact of, gay and lesbian residents, of couples, of their supportive family members, friends, coworkers, coming into the State House and having those one-on-one conversations, I think it would have been a very different outcome.
So when state legislators hear stories and meet people who were impacted by their loss, they're more likely to consider other points of views.
Absolutely, and the example I know I've mentioned to you before is when I was first a state representative considering the issue of supporting the repeal of mandatory minimum drug sentences. I met with a woman who was convicted under that law and was sentenced to jail for 15 years for what I found to be a very minor crime.
Was that the one where she was driving her boyfriend's car and there were drugs in it and she was convicted for that? She
was convicted for that, yep, and sentenced to MCI Framingham for 15 years. She was just released from jail last year. So if story like that certainly impacted my view on that, and I think if you had similar individuals or loved ones from every legislative district in Massachusetts telling those same stories, which we know are out there, I think it would have a dramatic impact on the kind of public policy that's passed up here in Beacon Hill.
Well, some of the activists I know are interested in this issue because there's a racist foundation to it, as well as the injustice. It's an injustice to no matter what color you are.
Sure.
So if people come and visit their legislators and they care about justice and having equality and equal rights, do you think that's a good reason to visit? Even though the drug war might not have necessarily touched them personally, do you think a face-to-face conversation is worth it in that regard?
I do. I think anything that connects to people's moral values, brings out those values, makes them pause and consider an issue, and it hopefully influences them to take action.
Okay, and another thing you have suggested is that we follow up with more information with legislators in case we might disagree. Could you say more about that?
Yeah, I think when you meet with a legislator that's undecided or perhaps is initially opposed to what you're asking them to do, providing information and then maybe 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later following up and asking if they read the information, if it maybe influences his or her decision or thought process, and then maybe asking for another meeting. I think you have to be patient in advocacy when you have a legislator that might not initially agree with your viewpoint.
Okay. Any other tips for success?
I think just always be polite, always be appreciative of the time that a legislator takes out of his or her schedule to meet with constituents, because we have very busy schedules, deal with literally dozens of issues every day. So take that into consideration when you're meeting with your legislators.
Okay. All right. Thanks again, Jamie.
Thank you,
Nice
Susan.
job.
Appreciate it.
Okay.